Our last lightning talk of the morning. I'm thrilled that Trevion Henderson is here, graduate student in the School of Education, to talk about his work looking at our newest tool in the software portfolio family, Tandem.
Great. So over the past several semesters, I've gotten a chance to work with a set of instructors over in the College of Engineering, teaching Engine 100, which is a cooperative learning experience. So thinking about cooperative learning experiences, these are team-based settings where students are cooperating with each other in this particular course to build small underwater vehicles. So there are a few challenges to facilitating effective teams, particularly in learning settings. First are student kind of learning concerns. The first that I'm particularly interested in are equity concerns. So who's getting to contribute to the team? Whose contributions are recognized on the team, and whose contributions are enacted. What I mean is, so I'm a baby brother, and when I was a kid, my brother used to unplug the controller from the Xbox and say, here, play with that, right? So, yes, I was there. You know, I felt like I was playing, but I wasn't actually playing the game, right? There are also concerns for things like individual differences, right? Lack of motivation. So thinking about students who may have wanted to take the drone course, but it filled up, and so now they're in the ROV course, the underwater vehicle course. And motivation can change from day to day, and so we are particularly interested in that as well. But also individual attitudes towards teamwork. Some of us don't like working in teams, and we're forced to take this teamwork course, right? But there are also teaching concerns, facilitation concerns, things like limited time. There's only so much time in the day that a teacher can devote to one student, one team, much less the entire class. Limited availability. Some of the issues in the team, particularly equity issues, can be difficult to see. And the other thing that we are interested in is the idea that sometimes we are more reactive than proactive. We are responding to things that are happening in the teams rather than preempting them. Which leads us to this new tool being developed by Academic Innovation in concert with instructors over in the College of Engineering, as well as data scientists, user experience experts, a number of people coming together on this team. Tandem is a pedagogical tool. It helps our instructors follow teams without actually being in the team setting 100% of the time. It's a teamwork tool, so it gives teams feedback on how they're doing, how individuals are responding on the teams. It's also a research tool. So I am shamelessly using this tool to collect data for my dissertation that's happening right now, right? But today I want to talk about it as a pedagogical tool and the way instructors are using it. A key function of Tandem is helping instructors identify those teams that are approaching trouble, right? Being proactive rather than reactive, and identify teams that are experiencing issues that need support. To do this, we collect a variety of data. First, we collect data at the beginning of the term on what I call these pre-experience measures. Some of these are individual motivations. What's motivating you in this class, right? Are you here because you want to build a great ROV? Are you here because the other courses were full? Are you here because you just need a great grade? And then also things like attitudes towards teamwork. Over the course of the project, we collect data on affective measures, things like how do you feel about the team? Are you working well, right? Or are things going poorly? And do you feel confident that your team is going to build a great ROV? And finally, over the course of the semester, we ask things about contribution. How are tasks being delegated? Who's participating in what? Who's not participating in what? And what is your sense of people's contributions to the team? So I asked two questions today. How can we optimize Tandem's data to address obstacles that typically affect teamwork in some of these courses? And can multiple sources of data help instructors understand some underlying issues, particularly before they happen, but to be timely when they do happen? So in the discussion with our research team, there was a question about, is this really triangulation? And frankly, this came up as I was talking to the Tandem team, and we were thinking about how we actually mark a team as needing support. I'll talk about how we did that in a moment, but what I said was, I actually do this in a very different way. I actually draw on a second set of data. I analyze that data, and that's how I decide which team is experiencing an issue. Why don't we compare and contrast those two processes and see if we're coming up with the same teams? And when we're not, let's ask some other questions about that. So First, we draw on the affective measures. This is what the tandem team uses. They take the weekly affective measures, how this team working together, to decide if a team is approaching problems. I draw on the contribution measures. One of the things about these learning environments is that we want the teams to be working well together and contributing to the entire project equitably. And finally, I call this broad category of things qualitative data. So first, the instructors are in class, they are observing the teams, there are IAs in the course that are observing the teams, but also as a part of my dissertation work, I'm embedded in some of the teams, watching them day to day outside of class and those types of things. So we can look at these three sources of data to see whether or not they are connecting. So we asked two questions. What conclusions can we draw when all of these sources of data align? Do we feel more confident? And how do we make sense of instances when these two don't align? So here's an example. So one of the questions that we ask on the larger surveys or on the weekly surveys is, where would you put your team on this scale? Are you working well? Are you working really well together? Or are you having problems working together this week? They get a weekly response. So here, Team Robo Vehicles gets a response, and it tells them where they are on a lot of these measures. So I'm focusing particularly on the red line. Here, we see at the beginning of the project, things are working well. And towards the end of the project, they start to experience some issues. The scores start to dip. But the idea here is if an individual score diverges from the team, if the entire team thinks things are going well and someone says that they're not, then we mark that student, the individual, as needing support or needing some attention from the instructors. But if the team's average is below a particular cutoff, then we mark that team as needing support, and we step into the team as well. For my work, I use a different approach. So I was happy to see a social network analysis presentation earlier. I use a social networks approach, and I asked the questions about contributions to the team. In particular, we're interested in equitable contributions to the team, so I asked questions about whose contributions are acknowledged on the team. Are there discrepancies between the team about recognized contributions? Are there students contributing more or less to particular tasks in a way that might concern us? To do this, there's a set of items that I ask students about contributions. So here, I'm asking about ideas to the team, right? How often do you and your teammates contribute ideas to the team? Never, rarely, sometimes, often, or always. Here in the social network approach, an arrow represents my perception of contributions to the team. So I'm going to pick on Robin because she's an instructor in the course. If I point at Robin, that means I perceive Robin as contributing to the team. If Robin does not point back at me, that means Robin does not perceive me as contributing to the team. We start to ask questions like, okay, who are the people most likely to experience these discrepancies? So if I say that I'm contributing, so there are self-ties in these networks. If I say I'm contributing, and Robin for some reason says I don't, maybe that's a place for further examination. But in this example, we see something interesting happening on the team. Student E here at the bottom is reporting everyone is contributing and no one is reporting student E. Is this a team in need of support? I say this because it might be the case that student E is contributing in some other way, but contributions in other ways doesn't necessarily mean that the team is behaving equitably. We know that contributing in other ways might still point to some equity issues, and we'll talk about that in a moment. A second example, here we see student K here at the bottom right. Student K, half of student K's team says that they're contributing, and the other half says that they're not. Is this a cause for concern? And what might this say about the team's working dynamics, about how contributions are being recognized on the team? So when these multiple sources of data align, we feel a little more confident that we've identified a team that might need some support. So for example, in this example, we see that they're working where the red line is starting to dip a little bit around week 7. And we're seeing some contribution issues in the social networks approach. Right, this might be a place where we need to step in and actually start to work with the team to support the team. But what about when these two don't align? Right, we see a team that says it's working really well together, and then something funky happening in the contribution measure. Is this cause to toss out the tool? I've already given you the answer. No. We're working really hard to build this tool, so we're not going to toss it out just yet. This is actually a good place, for me as a researcher, this is actually a good place for the research. But how do we suggest that our educators or facilitators should interpret this place where things are not aligning? I go back to that issue of those difficult to see equity issues, and I'll give you an example from a team. So existing literature, particularly in engineering education, suggests that women on design teams are likely to take on different roles than their male counterparts. In particular, women are more likely to take on communication tasks, things like making the slides for their presentation and writing up the reports, while the men are more likely to take on the technical engineering tasks. So when we ask things about contributions or effective responses, everyone says things are working well, we're getting things done, it looks like the team is going well. But then when we look at our contributions measures, we see inequity on the team about how people are able to participate, right? So to drive the point home, we take these two sources of data and we analyze them from two very different perspectives. And we say when they converge, we feel really confident that we've come up with a good view of the team. But when they diverge, we start to dig a little more to see what might be underlying some of the divergence. Thank you.
So I was wondering, what is the difference in the functionality of Tandem and versus CATME?
So actually some of the items in Tandem are CATME based. But Tandem does, so unfortunately because we only had 10 minutes, I had to water down what Tandem does. There's a lot more that the actual system does. So for one thing, at the beginning of the term, students take a survey about their own dispositions on the team, or individual dispositions, things like, I don't like working on the teams. They answer questions about things like imposter syndrome. After that, they start to get lessons. Some of these are weekly lessons that are designed to address some of these issues, right? So for instance, there's a imposter syndrome lesson that actually has students reflect on what that means and how different people respond to imposter syndrome. Some people respond to imposter syndrome by doing things like putting tasks off, right? They're afraid to actually engage in those tasks. Some people respond to imposter syndrome by fixation, right? They stay on the thing and cannot move from it until it's absolutely perfect because of imposter syndrome, right? So Tandem actually facilitates some of those lessons as well as some of the survey data collection.
Are those lessons individualized based on the survey responses?
Yes.
Do team members define roles at all at the outset?
So this
maybe
is,
you're not supposed to equitably contribute until later when it's your turn, kind of thing.
So this is in part why I'm doing some of the work that I'm doing for my dissertation, why I want to be inside the teams to see how this happens. There's a lot. So some of it is facilitated by Tandem. Actually, it was how much of this can I discuss? It was really interesting to see that. So yesterday they did a team-based activity in Tandem, where they were asked, what are some of the skills that you bring to this project? What are some of the things that you want to do more of that you don't necessarily have skills at? And after that, there was a discussion amongst the team about, some students said, hey, one student said, I grew up on a farm and I'm really good at building things, right? The next day they're in the lab building something, someone goes, I don't know how to use this, but I know that my teammate is really good at building things. Can you help me with this, right? Tandem is meant to facilitate those types of discussions, but I also know that from being embedded in teams that not everyone did that assignment in the same way. And so their sense of roles on the team looks very different, right? So that was sort of the point of the qualitative ethnographic piece of it, but it looks different across the team.
Trevion, you can describe how interventions are structured for teams in which only one student is reporting a problem?
Yes. So in part, I think what I've learned over the past 2 semesters is that small interventions can make massive differences. So for instance, there was a team in the pilot study, so I did a pilot study last semester, where we recognized that there was one person who dominated the team, who did a lot of, wrestled away a lot of tasks, and when the IAs became aware of that, it was a small intervention, just going over and saying, hey, make sure everybody gets to drive the RV, right? And everyone got to drive the RV. There are deeper issues where some of the instructors become involved. They get, so some of the data that comes in is actually text data that the instructors get to read through and respond to. So for instance, a group of students said, someone is not participating. The next question says, why do you think this person is not participating, right? What might you do to facilitate this? And then there's a discussion between the instructor and individual students, collective teams, about how they might draw on some of what they're seeing in tandem, but also in their teams to respond to individuals in the project setting.